If you're lucky enough to get into the water and you've kind of kept your cool and you're right below the pod, then it's this incredible game of picking off fish individually. So you need to start at the bottom. So as soon as you hook up, you need to be pulling that fish away from the pod.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haigh. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa.
You can join in the conversation with our new Facebook group called the Destination Angler Connection. Please check that out when you get a moment or two. And if you found it in your heart to give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast, we'd certainly be grateful. And today our destination is the Upper North Platte River in South Central Wyoming, one of the premier blue ribbon trout streams in the West. And our guest is Benjy Duke, Expeditions Director for the famous A Ranch, Wyoming's first guest ranch, established in 1922. Benjy is a self-described conservationist, guide, educator of outdoor recreation ecology and local history. He holds a bachelor's degree from Washington College in Humanities and Art History with a concentration in environmental science and culture. He's passionate about the outdoors, having worked for Wyoming Game and Fish on aquatic projects, conducted a fishery study for the ranch, and coordinated a pretty cool project with Trout Unlimited that I hope he can tell us a little bit more about today. And what's more, the A Ranch and their sister ranch, Big Creek, were the recipients of the Wyoming Game and Fish Landowner of the Year Award for conservation and stewardship practices. Needless to say, the Upper North Platte is a special place. So if you like pristine wilderness and excellent trout fishing in a remote setting, this episode's for you. Benjy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, glad to have you. All right, so tell me, where exactly is the A Ranch? Isn't like the nearest town like 20 miles away?
Yeah, we're pretty remote. So A Ranch is in South Central Wyoming. In fact, some of our ranch property, you brought up Big Creek Ranch, but there's a second or a third ranch as well, State Line Ranch, that actually stretches from North Park, Colorado, and then around in the valley, kind of following and paralleling the North Platte River, and then back onto the North Platte, just south of the town of Encampment in Saratoga. So it's a wonderful ranch, and we're fortunate to have the North Platte River right here in our backyard.
Yeah. And so about how many acres is that for the ranch?
The three ranches combined make up about 100,000 acres. And the guest ranch, A, is on the northern end of our property. The other two ranches, Big Creek and State Line Ranch, they're more of the agricultural ranches for beef production. But we also guide on Big Creek and State Line as well. So it's a very rich and diverse ranch in this sagebrush steppe environment through canyon lands and rolling sage. But we kind of follow the rivers and these corridors of green life down by the water. And it's really the water that kind of everything, wildlife, recreators, everybody kind of goes to in this area. And it's a wonderful place to explore.
Oh, that's great. And so I got to ask you, like, how far is the nearest Walmart?
I think we have one in Laramie, and that's about an hour and a half away, where the University of Wyoming is. But yeah, the nearest town is Encampment, and that is 20 miles away. Population of Encampment is around 300 people. So it's a very remote area, but there are a lot of these big ranches in the valley that make it feel quite at home for all of us, at least.
Well, that's part of the allure of the ranch, I imagine, the fact that it is remote and it is a real working ranch and, out in the wilderness. It's that kind of an experience that you're offering, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very much a ranch experience. Most of our guests at A, they come for the fly fishing, the riding, the hiking. We've got some great clay ranges. It's a very family-oriented ranch. We've got some great children's programs. We really try to engage with the entire spectrum of the family, from young kids to adults to grandparents. Everybody comes to the ranch, and we can fish and we can ride and explore together. And it's a really fun way to really be introduced and connect with this area of Wyoming. Most people, when they think of Wyoming, they think of Yellowstone and Jackson Hole, which is far from us. It's about 6 hours drive. That's obviously in the northwest corner of the state. we are right on the border in the middle of the state of Wyoming, between Wyoming and Colorado. So
Okay.
very different landscape down here, but rugged and wild in its own ways.
Sounds wonderful. So the North Platte, I believe, is best known for, these famed tailwater sections, the Miracle Mile and Gray's Reef. But when I was talking to you before the show about, what you wanted to talk about, you instantly said the Upper Freestone section instead. And so tell us, why are you so excited about the Upper North Platte, and what are the fishing opportunities there?
Yeah, well, first off, I think my experience has been on the Upper North Platte my entire life. And in fact, my family has been visiting these ranches for years. And so I feel like the Upper North Platte in this area of the state is very much my home water, so to speak. And what's so fascinating about the North Platte is that it's about 700 miles from headwaters until it meets the South Platte, but it changes drastically in between. This upper section is freestone. There's all these cold water tributaries that enter the river. It goes in and out of these steep canyons, through ranching valleys and these lush meadows. And it's not until about 120 miles downstream you start to reach those famed tailwater sections, the Miracle Mile and Gray Reef. And it's a completely different river. And for me, I go to Miracle Mile or Gray Reef occasionally, and I'm stumped. It looks completely different. The water acts differently. The fish are feeding differently. And up here, it changes by the day. It's this canyon river with great pocket water and long runs and undercut banks. And, I guess I've been able to figure it out through the course of my life. But yeah, it couldn't be more different than those tailwater sections that you mentioned, the Miracle Mile and Gray Reef. But that's, I think, what's so cool about the North Platte is it's so diverse, and you've got this rich ecosystem of wild Wyoming country throughout the entirety of the river. Even when you're floating the Miracle Mile or the Gray Reef, if you kind of glance across the landscape from a distance, it sort of looks barren, sagebrush, and just kind of these gentle rolling hills. But when you get on the water, and it's definitely true up here in the upper sections as well, the environment just comes to life. You start to notice things, lots of wildlife down on the river, huge antelope herds, everything from black bears to mountain lions. They all exist right here in our backyard. And it's not until you actually, drive off the road and kind of get down into these canyons or onto the water that you start to pick up on the rich diversity of wildlife and these ecosystems that are just, thriving. And I think it's because of the water. It's what's drawing life to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And water is a big deal out there, right? I know that you guys have worked very closely with the ranchers there, and the ranchers are working with the state and Trout Unlimited, and you've got some really neat things going on there, don't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Water is definitely the kind of the lifeblood of, any ranch setting, but certainly in this valley, it's got a great relationship with the North Platte. There's accounts of the Upper North Platte actually running dry in some sections historically. And it wasn't until homesteaders and ranchers first started entering the valley in the early to mid 1800s and started to irrigate the pastures in the valley, raising the water table, that allowed for the North Platte to actually continually flow throughout the year. So there's this incredible relationship between ranchers and the river, and all of us, and the stewardship practices that we all take to take care of the water and the life. But yeah, it's essentially, the flood irrigation is an amazing practice. I mean, it's these really, really carefully drawn lines across rugged and steep terrain that will carry water from head gates and these tributary streams, sometimes 40, 50 miles downhill, obviously, to your flooded irrigation meadow, and then it basically just spills out of a ditch and it flows across the grass. It catches all these secondary ditches that maybe takes the water around another hill or over another rise, and will irrigate the water. But what it's doing is it's as it appears when you're right there at the irrigation ditch, it looks like it's just flooding and laying the grass over, but it's obviously slowly absorbing into the ground, and that water will percolate through the ground and then eventually return to the river. So it acts like this huge sponge. And so not only are you getting rich grass and good hay crop and other things we need for livestock and also benefiting the wildlife, but you're getting this really cold return of water into the North Platte over a course of time that creates this slow release that will allow for the North Platte to flow continually through the year. It's a river that's driven mainly by, snowpack and runoff.
Yeah.
And, that's what really kind of, changes the way we fish the river year to year. Some years are lower than others. Last year was very high. So we were able to float the river almost through August in our section. This year, we've already pulled the rafts. So it's driven by snowpack, it's driven by runoff, but it's the relationship with the ranchers and the way they irrigate and take care of the valley, and over time has risen the water table that has created the North Platte, I think, into such a rich fishery as it is today.
Okay. And the ranchers have actually worked with Trout Unlimited too, right? You were telling me about a headgate diversion system that you put in that had some great results, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's this great relationship with like private land conservation and other, organizations in the area that really care and take care of the wildlife and the fisheries. And yeah, we did a project with Trout Unlimited several years ago on one of our tributary streams, Big Creek, that flows into the North Platte, just kind of at the bottom end of our property or the top end of our property, and then through Big Creek Ranch. And we had identified this total block in the creek itself, old irrigation structure, active irrigation structure with two big head gates that irrigated about 12,000 acres of land. So very important to the ranch to be able to use that water for the irrigation so we could, provide good hay crop and feed for the cattle, and also for the fish in the river as the water returns to the creek. But yeah, through my experience and everybody's before me, it's an irrigation dam. Now, water was able to flow over, but it didn't provide really clear passage for migrating fish, both rainbow and brown. So we contacted the Wyoming Game and Fish Department and asked them if they'd be interested in a project to better understand our fishery here at Big Creek. And so they were thrilled that we had approached them with this idea of tagging fish, laying these readers across the creek above and below the irrigation diversion, and then being able to monitor fish and how far they were able to swim up the creek during their migration and whether or not they were able to make it up and over the diversion dam. Yeah. We tried to tag, or we tagged, but we tried to monitor the rainbows. But because of our really heavy runoff event that year, we had some failures with the system of monitoring the fish or how the fish were able to swim across the readers. The readers were blowing out. And so we decided to focus mainly on the brown trout migration, which is obviously brown spawn in the fall. And, overall, Big Creek is more of a brown fishery in general. But we discovered that, through the tagged fish that we were watching, they were able to swim all the way upstream and make it up and through these beaver dams and nasty kind of log jams that were in place. And then they would reach the irrigation structure, and only about 10% of the fish were able to make it up and over. And so that was a little alarming. Fishery itself was very healthy. We'd had studies, done in population counts of the creek, and as a guide, I know that there are plenty of fish in the stream. But the fact that the fish were stopping at that head gate or at the diversion dam and not able to make it over when they wanted to was the kind of the perfect case for a really great project. So we partnered with Trout Unlimited, and the Trout Unlimited representative up here in the valley, Jeff Streeter, he's an incredible resource, and he worked with me carefully with a number of different environmental and engineering groups, and we designed a fish passageway that would sit on top of the irrigation structure that would allow us to continue irrigating the way we need the water. We have the way we wanted to use the water, but now it was allowing fish to be able to freely swim up and over the dam. And so then we ran a second study the next year after the completion of the dam. Same thing, we tagged brown trout, we laid readers across the creek. We were watching the fish as they were swimming upstream. And this time, when they reached the irrigation diversion, they made it over. So we went from a 10% success rate to like 95%.
Wow.
And, we're attributing the 5% loss of fish that decided to spawn elsewhere, just never made it to the actual structure itself. And so we were successfully able to reconnect a lot of Big Creek and provide hopefully a fishery that will support the North Platte and a lot of the users that want to come and fish this area. And that's just one example. There's tons of different projects like that. There's ranchers that really care about the wildlife and the fisheries and the water and good stewardship practices in this valley. And I think that's something I'm sure I know it happens in a lot of other great Western valleys in the Rocky Mountain states, but in this valley in particular, there's ranchers that care. And I think that's something that's really great. They're able to have a very successful agricultural ranch themselves, while providing benefit to wildlife and cold water fisheries.
Yeah, that's really fantastic that you've got ranchers that care that much, and they're even willing to sacrifice the water that they have legal rights to keep those streams running for you all year.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, good. Tell you what, could you give us an overview of the North Platte River system? Because the whole thing is just an incredible fishery, isn't it? Like, where does it start? How does it change as it flows north through the state of Wyoming, that sort of thing?
Yeah, great. And you're right, it does flow north. It's a little backwards, but it starts in North Park, Colorado, and that's where all of these tributary streams come together to make up the North Platte River, and that's about 30 miles upstream from where I am right now. It then enters a series of canyons. North Gate Canyon is a popular whitewater section. Then you reach down into some other areas of the canyon, and then it basically then just spits you out into these little valleys. Haigh is the first valley it really comes out of when it leaves the canyon. And then it kind of goes in and out of these much smaller canyons as it makes its way, passing the towns of Encampment and Saratoga into a much flatter landscape, kind of the rolling sagebrush hills. And then it does enter kind of another canyon until it flows into Seminoe Reservoir. And then really at Seminoe, it starts, it turns into that tailwater fishery. And you first have the Miracle Mile, and then it goes through another couple reservoirs and Pathfinder Reservoir, and then you've got the Gray Reef kind of out the other side. And from there, it kind of bends up to the northeast corner of the state and leaves Wyoming, enters Nebraska, where it joins the South Platte River and becomes the Platte River, and then on to the Missouri, and down it goes. But it's this incredible river it's so different, even from where I am right now, which is, in the close to the headwaters, but sort of in the canyon. I can wade across the river very, very easily right now in most sections.
Yeah. You
go down to the town of Saratoga, it's already picked up a lot of other tributary streams, and it's a completely different river system down there. It's this huge cottonwood corridor of sweeping bends with shelf that drop away. It fishes very differently than it does up here. And it's the same story the farther you go down. And actually the same story, as you move up. The headwater areas of the North Platte. In North Park, Colorado, is this big kind of conglomerate of meandering streams that flow in and out of these cold water seeps and springs, and then they finally kind of come together to make the North Platte. And so actually part of our property, the State Line Ranch, is in kind of the headwater area of the North Platte. And so we can fish we fish and guide on the very upper sections of the North Platte. And then it enters all of the canyons, and then it comes out at Haigh at the other end of the canyons.
Oh, I see.
That's where we do most of our other guides, all the other guiding.
You're driving people south to the start of this, and then floating or wading down from there, huh?
Yeah, we don't do too much floating, through the canyon. We float just kind of the Haigh section, kind of a very short section. But most of the river, is very wade friendly, and I'd say that's, hands down in my opinion, the most productive way of fishing, especially this upper stretch. There's a period of time, obviously, when it's better to be in a boat, and that's during kind of the runoff and as the runoff's starting to drop. But you can focus so much more when you're in the water, and you're just able to really to notice and pick up on all the little small nuances that are happening, and the small, the bugs that are hatching, and
right.
You can pick up a lot more, I think, when you're actually in the river and wading it. And so we're very fortunate to be able to have the capability of being able to wade and enter and access the North Platte where we are. But just upstream of us, there's enormous national forest sections of Medicine Bow National Forest, and actually Platte River Wilderness sections. And it's a really, really great place for anglers to explore, who want to get in and kind of work for the efforts of having an incredible day of fishing.
So those are public areas then?
They are, yeah. So right upstream from us is all public water.
Oh, nice.
Until you actually exit the canyon and are back in North Park. So you've got some great areas to fish and explore. I would say that it's because it's a canyon above us. You do have to kind of work for it a little bit. You've got to spend some time hiking down or into the canyons, but when you're there, it's fairly remote, and you can easily have a stretch of river to yourself. And I think wading the river is a really great way to study it and to understand what's happening. And as a guide, it's something that I love. I mean, I love being in a boat, and I love rowing. It's a fun way to fish and to be with friends and family. But from a guiding perspective, I actually think I prefer guiding wade trips, because there's so much to teach and for folks to learn along the way that has nothing to do with the fishing. And maybe it's your trail down into the river, and you're passing wildflowers and noticing different birds or wildlife and plants, and it kind of carries into the river in that same sense. You pick up on, or at least I do, I pick up on so much more when I'm in the river, and you can be waist deep in a run, and then all of a sudden notice a certain particular insect that's passing you, and there's this huge hatch of caddis that is happening, but every 30 seconds there's this little PMD spinner that comes floating by, and then it's kind of the aha moment. Oh, that's what they're feeding on. They don't care about the caddis tonight. They're into the other bugs. So
you actually have to observe a little bit, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes it fun. I mean, the approach you're describing sounds, methodical. You got to put your entomology hat on a little bit, maybe go into the canyon with a lot of knowledge ahead of time, obviously, so you know what to expect. But when you get down there, that concept of observing, not just wading in and starting to cast, sitting on the bank maybe and watching things for a while, is that what you'd recommend?
Absolutely. That's what I like to teach. It's the easiest way to become, I think, a successful angler is to be observant and to take time. I mean, there's so many times that I charge into the river thinking I have the right rig on my line.
Yeah, I've done that.
And I start casting and, putting the fly exactly where I want it, and nothing happens. And I get frustrated, and then I could try to think about what's happening, and maybe I'll sit down, or maybe I'll just stop for a minute, and then you start to pick up on the details, and maybe you flip over a rock and see what's crawling around. And I think it's a really really easy way to become a successful angler. What we teach to a lot of our guests are, we also offer youth camps through our expeditions program, and it's something that we practice with them. We get seine nets out and we look at the insects, and you don't have to be a doctorate, or you don't have to have a doctorate in entomology
Sure.
to really understand it all that well. It's matching size and shape and color. And if you can do that, I think you're going to have success.
It's pretty simple if you break it down. So talk to me about A-Bar-A, right? So you've talked a little bit about it already, but you've got some rich ranching traditions there mixed in with the fishing, right?
Yes, we do. It's an incredible ranch. I feel fortunate to be here. And it's a ranch that really caters to families. So it's a guest ranch, and it is one of the oldest and largest guest ranches in Wyoming, and established in 1922 as a guest ranch. And families come, they come for a week, and they partake in all of the ranching activities that you can imagine: fly fishing, riding, hiking, clay shooting, exploring. We've got an incredible kids program also. And I think what's really great about the ranch is that it provides the environment and place to develop these really deep connections with each other as a family group or your friends, with the environment, because we have this really wonderful, rich landscape that you get to learn through all these different activities. And, with yourself, I think you can learn something, hopefully a skill of some sort that you can take back to your home and follow up with down the road. And it's a really great ranch for families, and a lot of our guests have been coming for generations. This rich history of family groups that when they come, they everybody knows each other, and they've been coming the same week year after year after year. And so kind of there are traditions that develop, within each week's group of guests that carry on year after year. And it's a fun way to be able to spend good, rich time with the family and enjoy the great outdoors. And not to mention, you've got, this great place to stay and great dining atmosphere, and it's a wonderful experience and vacation for families. And I think that's why people love coming back, is because it kind of feels, acts, and looks the same year after year after year.
That's neat. And I think you told me that there's only been one change of ownership over almost 100 years, and you've got lots of historic houses and cabins, and even an expeditions program where you've got remote cabins set up throughout the 100,000 acres where you can kind of customize an itinerary for somebody.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to help the ranch kind of develop the expeditions program. And now I'm one of two directors of the program, and we've got, family trips, and we've got youth camps. We're offering self-supported trips, but the idea is to put up we put up some cabins in some of the remote areas of the ranch, and actually used a lot of the agricultural areas of the ranch at Big Creek and State Line, and provided this opportunity for groups to be able to develop and write their own itinerary, and to really get what they want out of the trip. So if it's a group of anglers and they want to fish every day, we can structure our week around the interests of the group. Likewise for riders or hikers or, backpackers, we've got this great, opportunity to customize the trip. And it's a great intimate experience with your family or your group that you're with. The guides are with the same group for the duration of the expedition. And they see a lot of the kind of the hidden corners and pockets of the ranch that some of the others don't get to see. And it's a really wonderful opportunity for us and all of our guides to have the opportunity to really kind of be challenged to understand the large landscape that that is in our backyard, and to really get to know it and lead people through it. And so, yeah, it's a wonderful experience for both youth and adults.
So you might actually bump into some of those mountain lions and some of those black bears you're talking about, huh?
Yeah, we've seen some great wildlife. Thankfully, we haven't had any scary encounters, but they're out there.
Right.
But we're usually really happy and feel fortunate to see them when we do.
Yeah, right. Well, what are these self-supported trips?
Yeah, so the self-supported trips is through the expeditions program using our expedition locations, and it's groups that are coming in for a stay on their own. So we help provide kind of some of the basic cabin staples and amenities, and then basically provide the access to the ranch, A-Bar A, Big Creek, and State Line for fishing, hiking, and exploring. And it's become quite a component of our program, and people are really enjoying that element of being able to really have their own trip, no guides, and just have the access to the ranch to be able to fish and hike, and actually access to a lot of the national forests too, because we're bordered by it, to up into the wilderness sections of the Platte River wilderness or other areas for their own adventures and fishing and hiking and getting to see the ranch and on their own time frame.
And some advice from you guys as you sort of send them off on their way, I'm sure, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We're providing them with maps and resources, fly patterns and kind of current conditions for all of our guests. We put together a very customized welcome packet, trip information for them. And so they feel like, they can hit the ground running. Although, through a lot of our conversations with each group before they arrive, we have an idea of what they want to do. And so we can still customize some of the stuff that we're offering, maybe pushing certain groups into areas of the ranch that we think that they would enjoy, or, showing people other areas of the North Platte or Big Creek or some of the lakes that we have on property that maybe they haven't gone to yet. So it's a fun way of guiding, but not actually being with them. And that's what we're doing this year. Unfortunately, because of COVID, the ranch is closed for guests this season, but we thankfully have been able to provide this self-supported opportunity.
I see.
To guests and family groups that are coming up to still want to engage with the ranch and to experience the North Platte, but kind of doing it on their own, which is great. We're really happy for them, and it's a great way for us to feel engaged also. It's a first year in 12 years, I think, that I haven't actually guided. So it feels a bit different for me not being in the water or on the trail as much as I normally am.
I'll bet. And so, Benjy, what's your story? How did you end up at A-Bar A? I know you're from Denver area, but it's a family thing for you, right? You mentioned earlier, I think your grandfather had stayed there. How'd you end up there?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town outside of Denver called Elizabeth, on a ranch myself, and my family has been visiting the ranch for a long time. My grandfather and my grandparents started taking my family to A-Bar A as guests when I was very, very young. And basically we've been coming to the ranch every summer ever since.
Nice.
And so I knew it was in my cards, hopefully, to land a job with A-Bar A. And, I applied for, various positions my first summer in college, and actually was the gardener of all jobs.
Oh, yeah.
My first summer.
Got to start somewhere.
It's kind of a hidden secret, because you're able to, make sure the plants aren't dying and everything's, well taken care of. And then, it's a quick trip down to the river for the rest of the day. And then I started guiding my second summer for the ranch and kind of carried that through the rest of college. And then I moved to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where I spent about a year and a half and worked for the Wyoming Game and Fish for one summer. And then the opportunity presented itself to come back to the ranch to help them start the expeditions program. And it's their first guide of the program. And I thought that was the ticket to my career. And I've been here since. I've met my wife here at the A-Bar A, and
oh, nice.
It's definitely a place that connects deeply with my family, my sister, her fiance, and many of my cousins have worked here in the past. And so when I think of a place that I call like my home waters or my summer home, it's the A-Bar A.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah. So the Upper North Platte, I believe, is designated a blue ribbon trout fishery by Wyoming Game and Fish, right? So, I mean, this is a well-known area for fly fishermen, for trout fishermen. And I wonder if you could give me a sense of, what's a typical day on the upper in terms of, size and numbers of fish? Like say, if you're guiding some average anglers on a typical day, how well could you do?
Well, it's a great question. I would say that it changes by the day and it changes by the season. In the first part of the season, it's runoff and it's muddy. We're fishing really deep nymph rigs with, heavy weighted stoneflies and San Juan worms and, picking up fish right against the bank. Kind of they're all pressed to the bank, and you can be floating down or wading up to one of these tributary streams that's just pumping clear water into the river and sit there and catch, a dozen fish in a half hour, and browns and rainbows, occasionally some brookies right there at the confluences, and I would say our average size is 14, 16 inches. It's kind of the average fish here. We've gone north of there before with some fish over 20 inches, and a few accounts of some larger ones, but it changes. So that's the early part of the season. And then it kind of starts to drop and clear and becomes a little bit more technical. Our first big hatch is, the caddis hatch. And then that's mixed with, a lot of different stoneflies. We get some salmon flies that hatch kind of in the canyon, but they trickle down into this area, the ranch. But we see a lot of golden stones and yellow sallies.
Okay.
So it kind of quickly changes to, from a deep, heavy nymph rig to, starting to lighten the load a little bit. And you're now casting, some dry flies and still keeping a, kind of a nymph of some sort below for the first part of the season. And then right about now, this time of year, mid-July is when it really switches. And certainly in the deeper runs, you can have a lot of success with some long nymph rigs, but it's a dry fly stream kind of from here on out. And I think that's what really makes it special. And, we kind of have this great diversity of different mayflies from PMD to drakes to, Tricos, and it changes BWOs throughout the season. And then basically as the season tapers into fall, in the colder months, you get these different windows of time when you get these hatches occurring. And, some days might not be about the numbers. Maybe it's the size. And because you're able to target specific fish that you see along the bank and the rivers, it's always kind of a tea color, but it's clear enough to where you can see fish, especially when they start to pod, and feed on a very specific insect. And,
okay,
you can have very, very rewarding days, and it may not be in the numbers of fish, but it's in either size or the fact that you've been fishing, 6X with a tiny size 22 Trico spinner and you had success landing, an 18-inch brown in Wyoming. And that's what it is, I think, for a lot of different anglers, is that you can have days where you catch a ton and others days that are very different, but you can find the reward through different methods.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's
not necessarily in numbers, right? But just in the overall experience and what you've accomplished as an angler.
But it's an incredible fishery. I think in terms of just where we are geographically, in the Rocky Mountains and, having this great relationship between these large private ranches and an incredible organization through the Wyoming Game and Fish and Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and these groups that really care and are protecting and enhancing the wildlife and the ecosystems. It's a very, very great place to come and to either whether you're first, you've never fished before and you're just picking up a rod for the first time, or you're a seasoned angler. There are so many great opportunities, and you can make it as technical as you want.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, Benjy, let's backtrack and let's go through these hatches again. So give me approximately when these hatches are going on. So like the first big hatch you said was the caddis hatch. When do they show up?
I would say they show up mid-June. It's always a hatch that, kind of basically, kickstarts the season in terms of when I know I can start fishing a dry, really. I mean, you get some, like I mentioned, you get some salmon flies and some larger stone flies that hatch earlier than that. but it's for such a short period of time, and it's very hit or miss that I know that when the summer is here, when I see the caddis, and when they arrive, they hatch in these huge waves in the evening time, and the fish at that point are starting to make their way from banks back to their normal lives in the middle of the river. In that same period of time, you're seeing a lot of PMDs, a lot of yellow sallies, some green drakes, and, they're hatching kind of day to day. The hatches happen, a little differently each day. There's some days you may see more sallies than PMDs and vice versa. It's this kind of fun game of going out there and trying to figure out what's going to be happening today. But generally, the first part of the season, you can count on caddis in the evenings. And whether you're, fishing a pupa or dead drifting a caddis or skating them across, that's kind of your game in the evening time. In the middle part of the day, you can have fun kind of figuring it out with a lot of the other bugs and emerging insects. And then it reaches a period of mid-July, early July, that terrestrials are a big component of the trout's, food
diet.
supply and diet. And it is, from that point on, I feel like I have a hopper on my line almost every day. Even if I decide to nymph, a deeper run, I feel like I'm keeping a pretty big foam hopper somewhere on my line, because those fish are looking for those bugs. And, again, that's an easy thing you can pick up on as you're approaching the river. I mean, sometimes, through these grassy meadows, you're just walking through and there's just, you're parting these waves of grasshoppers.
Oh my gosh.
And on a windy day, which, is unfortunate to say as an angler, happens quite frequently here in Wyoming. Those bugs are being pushed into the water. And, you can also have really good luck on other sorts of terrestrials, ants and beetles. A lot of our canyons are lined in, thick evergreen and spruce forests. And so there's lots of different beetles and ants that are falling into the river from the trees.
Nice.
And then there's the tricos. And I think the trico mayfly is quite possibly the hatch that everybody kind of waits for, at least in terms of, this section of the Upper North Platte. It's a hatch that when it happens, the fish basically shut off all of their interest in feeding, and they focus on the tricos, and there are clouds of these tricos that hatch. And, you can be downstream and with the right light, look upstream and see these huge pillars of clouds of tricos as they're coming off the water. That they're about to hit the water soon as they fall, and you could be lucky enough to be right in its path.
To have them pick your fly, that's probably the challenge with those trico hatches, isn't it?
Oh, geez. It's a little bit of common sense. I mean, it's like, how on earth can my size 22 trico spinner that kind of sits under the film of the water anyways make a difference to the fish when you've got mats of trico, dead spent spinners on the surface? And the incredible part about this hatch is that, the fish come up for the spinners, and they're just in these pods and groups of, 20 to 30 fish, and they're just rising in this rhythm of that almost should be following like a metronome. It's just this up and down, and down. And, your fly is certainly mixed into the mat of tricos as it's flowing downstream, but it's almost a timing thing. You have to watch the fish as it's coming up and down and time it perfectly for your fly to be gulped. And, I think the fish, with the patterns now, there might be a little sparkle or something that separates your fly from the others that the fish might key into. But I think it really is this timing game that you play. And when you lay your fly out there and it's drifting down, the fish, I think more often than not, might be coming up for like a gulp of them, maybe 20 or 30 flies that are all kind of, matted together.
Sure.
And yours just happens to be in the mix. And as an angler, it's incredibly exciting. I mean, you can see these fish, the water's clear, you can look through. It's not like sight fishing when, you've got this tricky run and you're trying to wait for that perfect window of water to pass. And then you see the white of the mouth open as they flash on a nymph. This is like fish coming up and out of the water and just porpoising over and over and over again. You can see with the right light, the whole silhouette of their side profile of the fish.
Yeah.
So it's a very exciting moment. Now I got to say, as a guide though, I almost shake my head. I'm like, oh, Tricos, here we go. Because it can be so frustrating because you change your entire setup from, generally a pretty manageable rig. Say we were fishing a hopper the day before and, we've got it on 4 or 5X with a dropper of some type below it. You kind of want it to slap the water and you want it to fall off the bank. The next day you walk out into the river and you just see every fish has decided to ignore the hoppers and to focus on these Tricos. And so you're now fishing 10-foot 6X leaders with really, really fine tippet and size 22 Trico spinners. And because you're with someone who is also very excited to be there and they've just made their way across the state or country or wherever they're coming from to catch that good Wyoming brown or rainbow.
Yeah.
And they see these pods of fish and every fish coming up out of the water, they get excited, but it's such a careful act. You have to carefully pick off the fish kind of from the bottom of the pod all the way up to the top.
So you're fishing upstream.
Fishing upstream for sure.
Yeah.
You can downdrift to a pod, and there's some techniques of, swinging some soft tackles, some old techniques of catching fish in these sorts of conditions. But I think in a pretty traditional sense, easiest way to manage it is you find your pod of fish and you go way downstream of them and you get into the water and you about crawl. You have to be very quiet. You don't want to send a wake upstream. I've never really understood, besides just a loud splashing noise, if they can feel that water, but they're sensing it somehow.
Right.
And if you're not quiet about it, you don't get into the right position. You can put the whole pod down and right away it's over, you're done. You have to basically wait or find the next group of fish. But if you're lucky enough to get into the water and you've kind of kept your cool and you're right below the pod, then it's this incredible game of picking off fish individually. So you need to start at the bottom and you catch the bottom fish first. But it's that in itself is then strategy to be able to keep fishing that same pod. So as soon as you hook up, you need to be pulling that fish away from the pod, keeping him out of the zone, and then you can eventually work your way up. So you can imagine as a guide, you've got 30 fish rising in front of you, someone who's just had 6 cups of coffee, and they are ready to catch that Wyoming brown on their favorite fly. And they enter into the river, and as a guide, you're thinking, oh man, this could be awesome. We could catch 20 fish right now if we're careful, or in one cast or one fumbled step, we're done. We have to go. We're going upstream somewhere. So
the guy puts a line over the whole pod and they're all gone.
Yep, that's right. And I know these big fish are big for a reason, and they'll be sitting in the middle of the pod. So you've got 2 options. It's like, all right, you got to be careful and catch all these little fish out of the way, or let's bomb one cast and maybe have a chance that fish will feed once more before the rest of your line, floats over the rest of the pod. So that is a really fun experience, and there's some great techniques for it. I mean, a size 22 spinner, you're not going to be able to see that on the water without some sort of lead fly. So I always my go-to is something that's got a nice white post on a parachute atom.
Sure.
You can even fish an ant or something that's got a nice post that you can see. And I'm fishing that, about 20 inches in front of my Trico spinner. Both of those are on 6X though, because you need that to be, invisible essentially to the fish.
Yeah. And
then you're just watching your lead fly and you're just looking for any sort of slurp or movement to that fly.
Sure.
Kind of in that 20-inch radius. And you can really dial it in.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way to do it. And at least that I've figured out. You can get lucky and have fish come up and just hammer the lead fly once in a while. I think they may be hitting that out of aggression, or maybe they're sick of Tricos and they want something else. But yeah, it's a really, really fun hatch that we see on the Upper North Platte. I think it hatches all throughout the North Platte, fishery, but at least up in this section, it's a hatch that we're all waiting for. And when it happens, it's exciting. Everybody enjoys
Lights out.
And it's, back at dinner time, everybody's talking about the Tricos, and it's like, how many did you break off today?
Yeah, in 6X. Benjy, what time of year, is that an August hatch?
It is an August hatch. It can come as early as late July. It'll be interesting to watch and see if they come off a little bit earlier this year, because the river is quite a bit lower than usual. It's, we're at about, 100% snowpack this winter, but it, compared to last year, which was a huge runoff year, it just feels a lot lower. But usually it's late July, early to mid-August, you can count on fishing Tricos. And
okay, a couple of weeks then of Trico fishing.
Yeah, it is. No, it's 2 or 3 weeks of solid Trico fishing.
Oh, nice.
It seems like when they first start, the fisher, that's all they care about, and they will hammer Tricos every day, probably throughout the night. And then as the hatch kind of tapers off, they start to pick up on some of the other insects, and as the temperatures start to cool too, and later in August, we start to get some good blueing hatches and, some other sort of smaller beta type insects. But it's definitely the hatch that we wait for the summer months, the main summer months.
Yeah. This is kind of like insider trading here, hearing all these fantastic tips on how to be successful on the Upper North Platte is really fantastic. So we're heading up to the top of the hour here. Benjy, would you mind just ticking off, some of your top go-to patterns and sizes and colors and whatnot? And then for all of your listeners, we'll put these on the Destination Angler Facebook page when this episode publishes, so people can take a look at them.
Sure. Yeah. So, I guess from the first part of the season, I'm fishing a lot of different stonefly patterns. You can be very traditional on the upper stretch here, and Kaufman stone, black and brown. Lots of variations of girdle bugs. Yeah. Size wise, you don't have to be too specific. It's nothing monstrous. Kind of more in the 6 to 10 or 8 to 10 hook size range. You can your favorite color of worm will work during the runoff. And then standard elk hair caddis, cutter caddis, olive and tan, size 14 and 16 are great fly patterns for the caddis hatch. PMDs, a lot of good rusty spinner patterns. Slightly larger in the 12 to 14 hook size range. Okay. And then hopper wise, it's fun to fish them all. I have a lot of luck on kind of the Chernobyl ants and things that may be imitating some of those stone flies that might still be fluttering around, but you can fish a lot of different foam patterns. Again, I think it's also fun to fish some of those traditional kind of the para hoppers and some of the patterns that just look really buggy on a surface. Nymph flies, you're not going to go wrong with the standard pheasant tails and hare's ears. And as you start to move into the lower water in late August or late July, early August, there are a lot of great midges in the river as well. And so fishing black and purple and red zebra midges, some of the bars emergers to imitate some of the BWO patterns or BWO mayflies. And those are a bit smaller. Those the midges and the bars emergers, those are size 18 to 22. And it's really kind of, I'm always dropping those off the back end of, some other nymph that's kind of carrying the weight. Sure. Tricos, I found most luck on a size 22 Trico spinner, just very traditional, black bodied with not too much flash. And, I tie one that's got a little post that you can, that'll help you kind of pick them up a little bit better by themselves. I still definitely recommend putting a lead fly, like a parachute Adams or something in front that you can see. Purple haze is another great pattern. And those Tricos are small. I mean, occasionally you'll see some bigger ones come off a while, and you might be able to drop it to 18, but it's size 20 and 22.
Okay, size 22.
Yep, I know. Yeah, bring your magnifying glass.
Yeah, bring your readers, man. It's going to test all us old people in our eyeballs, that's for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, and so it's a really dynamic stream, and I think the greatest element of fly fishing in this area, and this is true for any stream in the world, is you can take your time to get to know it, and that's really what we teach and guide, is that when you walk to the water, sit down and just observe for a minute, and you'll notice things. And
yeah,
it'll be pretty obvious if they're feeding on the Tricos, because you'll see maps of spinners on the water, but
you'll know.
But it's as simple as sometimes just not charging into the water and just being a little more observant that can create great luck. So
that's a tip. Let me ask you something. It's obvious that fly fishing has been a central focus in your life, and maybe has even changed your life in significant ways. Tell me why, and you're obviously passionate. Tell me, why you're so passionate about all this and what it really means to you.
It's that connection that I have with the environment, and with the ecosystem, and with the friends and family that I have to share all of it with. And I think that's the greatest element of fly fishing, is that you can be anywhere in the world, and it's probably not going to be ugly. You're going to learn something every day. Fishing. And it's this challenge. It's just a constant challenge. And you can focus on it and be as specific and as focused as you want. It's always changing. And and in each river, you've got another, some history that you can learn. And there's this relationship between how people interact with the landscape and how that changes, throughout the resource. And
sure,
I think that's just really fun to understand. A quick story that we didn't share earlier that would be fun to share briefly now is that the North Platte has got some interesting history itself. As a trout fishery, it's a recent thing in its life. So trout are not native to the North Platte River. They're actually, they're of course native trout to Wyoming. There are 4 subspecies of the cutthroat. You've got the Snake River cutthroat and the Yellowstone, the Bonneville, and the Colorado River cutthroat. But in the North Platte watershed, for whatever reason, no trout have ever been discovered, past basically the mid 1800s. And it's really, maybe it's because, the irrigation and the relationship that ranching and development in the area needed to play, and then be able to have continual flow of water in the river. But you have to think still, with enough runoff and springs, that there would be fish, trout in the streams, but
sure,
there wasn't. And so there's this really cool story of this Union Pacific train that derailed in 1872, just north of the town of Saratoga, crossing the North Platte River. Now, it didn't just fall over into the river; it fell over near the river, but it was carrying fingerling, rainbow, and brook trout, California. And as the train tracks and the train were being fixed, some member of the crew noticed that a lot of the fish in these barrels were dying. And you probably wouldn't want to do this today, but back then it worked. And I'm thanking the guy every day that I go out fishing now who did this. But he took those barrels and he ran down to the bank of the North Platte and he dumped them in.
Dumped them in there.
Just dumped them in. And those fish thrived. And there were accounts in the Saratoga newspaper and of these huge trout, 10-pound rainbows that were all of a sudden leaping out of the water in town. And people were trying to figure out, well, how on earth did they get here? There were no trout.
Yeah.
And they led it back to this train derailment. Through time, we've obviously introduced brown trout. We've introduced other species too. The cutthroat and brookies, but it's really become a rainbow and brown fishery in the upper stretch. And it's all attributed to this great guy who decided to dump the fish into the river. And obviously when he did so, and the trout, the rainbows and the brookies, they could balance pretty well. They spawn the same time of the year, and the brookies probably found their refuge in the smaller little cold water tributaries, and the rainbows dominated the main stem of the North Platte. And then when we introduced the browns, I'm sure there was kind of, this big ruckus that occurred, and of this balance of trout trying to equalize. But, since browns spawn in the fall and rainbows in the spring, it all worked out. And now it's this really incredible, rich ecosystem. But, from where I'm standing right now, I'm basically 30 miles in either direction from two different subspecies of native cutthroat. You've got the Colorado River cutthroat, basically on the other side of the Sierra Madres that flow, through the Yampa Valley into the Colorado River. And then just on the other side of North Park, Colorado, you've got the Never Summer Mountains, and that goes through Rocky Mountain National Park, the Poudre River Canyon, and that's, historic water for the greenback cutthroat. So two different subspecies of cutthroat that never found their way into the
isn't that crazy?
The North Platte watershed. I don't understand it, but we have trout now. They're not cutthroat in this area of the state, but it's a rich and thriving fishery. So,
well, I can't wait to get up there and fish that river system. It sounds absolutely wonderful, and thank goodness for that Union Pacific worker who decided to not waste these fingerlings and dump them into the creek. Sounds like a God thing to me, because here we are, 100 years later and then some, talking about great fishing on the Upper North Platte. Benjy, how can our listeners get in touch with you and the ranch?
Yeah, that'd be great. So we've got a website, obviously, and that's aranch.com. Check us out. We'd love to be in touch with you or any of your friends that may be interested in a future trip. There are also some other great resources in the area. If you're interested in a trip on your own, the Wyoming Game and Fish Department is a great place to start. If you're looking to explore maps and resources of areas to public areas in the Upper North Platte, and the towns of Saratoga, Encampment, and Walden, Colorado. Saratoga and Encampment are in Wyoming. Walden, Colorado, up in North Park, are great places and resources, good fly shops in the areas.
Good.
And great places to eat. And so it's a wonderful community.
Okay.
Wonderful place to be, and a valley you got to check out.
All right. Well, good. Well, listen, we'll post all this to the show notes on our website, and we'll also put those pictures up of Benjy's top picks for flies on our Destination Angler Facebook page. And you can always email me with comments and suggestions at shaig50@gmail.com. That's shaigh50@gmail.com. If you're a guide and want to be on the show, give me a shout. And please give us a share, like, or follow on Facebook or Instagram. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. As always, our music is by Brothers Fountain. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you again next week.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.